Bloodborne has to be one of the strangest cases in modern gaming because not only is it one of the most praised games of the last decade, it's one of the most beloved games of the last decade. It's developed by From Software, who is a company that's proven themselves to be capable of selling basically anything with their name on it. It's directed by Miyazaki, who is comfortably one of the most iconic game directors of all time, and yet despite all this, it's received no actual preservation attempts since it came out, really. No performance patches, no next-gen update or anything, and despite this also being the age of remakes and remasters, Sony has puzzlingly not mentioned one of those things for this game. It's gotten to the point that From Software and Miyazaki are openly acknowledging the fact that people want it because it's so utterly unignorable, and yet Sony remains ignorant somehow. We also live in a time where Sony is getting heavily criticized for prioritizing graphics and cutscenes over gameplay in their published games, all while they're literally sitting on what many people consider to be From Software's finest work, and yet they remain either unaware or uninterested in re-releasing some of the most praised gameplay of all time. There's a meme that Sony lost the source code for Bloodborne and is literally incapable of doing anything with Bloodborne without remaking it from the ground up, and that's why they're not acknowledging it. And the longer that it takes to acknowledge it, the more that meme just kind of sounds like news, because it's truly the only explanation I can think of at this point. Like, we're actually in a timeline where we're getting a remake of Until Dawn and potentially a remake of Horizon Zero Dawn before Bloodborne even gets a 60 FPS patch. Like, we're genuinely in the dumbest timeline imaginable. But the other day, some big strides for Bloodborne's emulation were spread around the internet, and they were pretty interesting. A ton of work has been done on getting the nonsense spaghetti code of Bloodborne and the PS4 untangled and running on the PC, because the PC community truly is the Thanos I'll do it myself meme. Because if you're not going to release this game on PC or update the performance, the modders will just figure it out for you. Which I think is the funniest thing ever, because Sony could make such a stupid amount of money by just doing this first, but apparently it's too much to even mention that you hear the demand for it. But if you're not going to do it, Sony, someone else will. If you're not going to preserve Bloodborne, the PC players will. And while it's certainly taking a while for the job to get done, some solid strides have been made recently, and that's really cool. However, if you're a PlayStation diehard, chances are you just saw this news of Bloodborne getting progressed through the emulation steps as yet another step for your favorite brand to becoming irrelevant or something. Even though all the other PlayStation games are coming to PC anyways, and if you actually cared about preserving games and allowing more people to play this game that you hold in such high regards, you would think that you would actually be excited about the fact that people are working around Sony's behavior and ensuring that Bloodborne gets preserved for future generations, even if Sony remains incompetent. And I want to stress that for the most part, the PlayStation dudes do have that perspective, but there were a few that took the news of Bloodborne getting closer to being properly emulated and preserved. There were a few that took that news as a personal attack on them or something, because it's not like you have anything else to talk about right now if you're a PlayStation fanboy. I mean, PlayStation Ws have been a bit scarce the last couple years, so it's not that surprising that the idea of losing yet another exclusive makes you pee your pants a little bit. Even if it's an exclusive that nobody wants to remain exclusive, including the game's developers themselves, and it's an exclusive that Sony seems completely uninterested in doing anything with. But you're going to pee your pants anyways, because Sony said exclusives are necessary, and you believed them. And you all say that PlayStation exclusives are amazing and wonderful and must-play titles, but then the second that somebody suggests being able to play those games on other hardware, you just lose all the bones in your body because you think a game's quality and value are somehow tied to whether or not it's exclusive to your favorite branded piece of gaming hardware. So come along with me, dear viewer, as we take a look at some PlayStation fanboys who took it really personally that some absolute legends in the PC community have taken it upon themselves to do Sony's job for them. And to those brave and wondrous fairy creatures out there who are making Bloodborne playable on PC, the most respectful head nods to you. You are doing the Lord's work. But now let's laugh at some PlayStation fanboys. Silent Dad Plays Games responds to the news, says if Sony won't get it on PC, then the emulator community surely will. And then Christian Valterra responds, PC players would do anything but buy a $100 PS4 and play it there. I like how you think this is an own somehow. Like, yeah, PC gamers aren't gonna buy hardware they don't want for one singular game. Sony told us to buy the PS4 years ago, and we said no. It doesn't matter what the PS4 costs, we're not gonna buy it, especially not now. If you're a PC gamer, why would you spend any money on a piece of hardware that old and outdated that you are quite literally never going to use once you're done with Bloodborne? And you're gonna be playing it at performance metrics that are a detriment to the experience in, like, every way. Of course we're not gonna buy hardware just for that. We respect our money more than you do. The fact we're not willing to buy hardware for the sake of games that are held hostage it's not a mark against the PC community. But also, you don't think the game should be preserved or updated all because it's available on a $100 console? That's really the best you got? Game runs like ass, and there's a lot of people who want to play it but don't want to buy specific shitty hardware for it, but none of that matters because you could just do the thing that you don't want to do in order to play the game, therefore it's an own. That's pro-consumer, right? Plus, Sony doesn't even get anything out of the transaction you're describing. That just makes the whole thing funnier. Oh, why don't PC gamers just get a PS4 for $100? Okay, so a $100 PS4, you're talking about a used one. Sony's not selling them fresh for $100. You're talking about a used PS4, which is a transaction that Sony gets nothing from. You want PC gamers to do a thing that earns Sony no money instead of them doing a different thing that earns Sony no money. And you're arguing all of this in the name of defending Sony. And the fact that this isn't even for a first-party game, it just makes the salt so much stupider in this case than other cases. Like, Sony's developers didn't even make this. From Software did. So you can't even make the argument that, first-party PlayStation game. It's not even first-party. It's from a studio that's best known for their multi-platform games, and whose most popular platform isn't even the PlayStation. It's stupid enough when PlayStation dudes melt down over first-party games becoming playable on the PC, but when it's not even a first-party game, you just look like even more of a dick. Of course, news of a PlayStation game getting emulated couldn't go by without IconEra chiming in. Quote, PlayStation 4 emulator Shade PS4 is now capable of running Bloodborne on PC at 1 frame per second. You can smell the insecurity on this one. Like, what's the headline going to be once gameplay's up and running, you know? PlayStation fanboys always do this thing where if there's a technical shortcoming on the PC version of a game or like in a mod or something, they'll hold it over PC gamers' head for as long as humanly possible because it's the only time they can argue that they win the hardware battle between the PlayStation and PC. Last of Us on PC runs infinitely better than the PlayStation version today, but it doesn't matter because they still want to talk about how it launched, you know? So they'll throw all the shit they can at the current state of Bloodborne on an emulator and they'll use it as ammo, but like at least the PC version has some progress, you know what I mean? Sony is doing nothing for you, and you're still backing them in this situation, all because the emulated version of Bloodborne isn't finished. It just comes off as so insecure. That generic Eric responds and says, PCMR can't even run a 9-year-old $10 game running on 11-year-old hardware. PCMR pays thousands and they still can't keep up with the greatness on PS4. No wonder they beg for everything we get. I mean, we have like all the other PS4 games. So if you're saying that the greatness of the PS4 is solely because of Bloodborne, that smells like a self-own to me. Like, yeah, the PC can't really play Bloodborne now, and again, you're definitely going to want to get mileage out of this while you can. But when it comes to playing Bloodborne at modern performance and properly preserving this game, like when it comes to those things, the PC is seemingly the only platform interested in making progress towards it. You can poke all the fun you want about it not being on the PC now, but this update is proof that the PC version is working towards it, and the PlayStation is just apparently not. The original version of Bloodborne is not being updated or improved or preserved no matter how much you lick Sony's taint over it. Now, will it happen in the future? Maybe, but there doesn't seem to be any progress or hustle towards it. But on the PC, there is. And if you actually cared about this game and not just the PlayStation logo on the box, you would understand this. But you don't care about the game, and that's why the preservation of the game makes you angry. Because people are not giving Sony any money for it. And that's just where it ends with you. Kuro Gamer responds to generic Eric and says, I like PC gaming, but PC players are so full of themselves they won't give up until the game is there. I'm glad Sony is bullying them with Bloodborne by not releasing it on PC, lol. PC players are full of themselves. PC players are full of themselves, even though you think a corporation is spiting them just to bully them. You think a corporation is bullying a consumer base for pettiness that you just so happen to share with them. But PC players are full of themselves. Your demographic of gamers are totally selfless and don't care about petty stuff like this. The PC gamers are the ones who think too highly of themselves. Okay, and then you actually go into the IconEra thread proper, and it gets even stupider. JawGamer says this is exactly how games should end up on PC, not with ports, and it's why PC port begging was always disingenuous drivel from pricks that just wanted to see Sony fail. Sadly, they got their wish, and as I said this a few days ago, Sony should be ashamed of themselves. So, wishing for Sony to fail is the only reason PC gamers want ports of PlayStation games. That's the only reason. It has nothing to do with the actual games. Why would it have anything to do with the actual games? These are PlayStation fanboys. Why would anyone's interest in video games actually come from the video games themselves and not the corporations? Apparently, wanting PlayStation games on PC is disingenuous port begging that was all done simply because we wanted to see Sony fail. You think everyone who wants PlayStation games on PC is as childish and corpo-obsessed as you. The fact that you see the world this way is fascinatingly stupid. But also, what should Sony be ashamed of? Exactly. I'm perfectly happy to just not know this part of the stupid conversation lore here, but I'm genuinely not seeing what Sony should be ashamed of in this context specifically. Because the only thing that I can think of is the fact that Bloodborne's not being preserved. They have my full permission to be ashamed of that, but that's clearly not what you're referring to here, because you also say that Sony shouldn't be porting games to PC at all, because emulation is how games are supposed to get over here. So, are you saying Sony should be ashamed of themselves for porting games to PC at all? Because that's really fucking stupid if that's what you're saying that they should be ashamed of. It's all just, it's all so stupid. Here's another one. Eternal Wings says Sony just needs to do a Nintendo. Send these thieves mail from your lawyers. This junk will be sooner shut down as you could count to 3. By the way, Yuzu is dead. You are actually encouraging Sony to take legal action against people wanting to play a game that Sony refuses to properly sell. And you think this is a good thing for you, the consumer. This is behavior that you encourage. People actually think like this. People actually care this much about corporations they're giving money to, as opposed to the products they're spending money on. It's unbelievable. Like, I truly don't get it. From Software made this game. They don't want it locked on the PS4, they have said that explicitly, but Sony is keeping it there for reasons unexplained, and you think that's not only forgivable behavior, but that they should take legal action to protect said behavior. And you think this benefits you as the consumer in any possible way. You think that this is not only a morally correct thing, but is also a good thing to happen. IconEra truly has the worst takes I've ever seen on the internet. It is incredible. One more tweet, quote tweeting the news of the emulator starting up Bloodborne, and they say, quote, "I don't think this should be allowed." No explanation as to why. No argument as to why. Nah, this shouldn't be allowed. My favorite corpo isn't getting money from the art they didn't make. The world is my personal Minecraft server, and this is banned. Look, Bloodborne is coming to PC one way or another. Like, if Sony isn't going to properly port it to PC, do you really think the platform where emulation is insanely popular and modding is insanely popular, and the platform is really insanely into From Software games, do you really think that platform isn't going to just figure it out eventually? This was and still is inevitable. And if you actually care about games being properly preserved, you wouldn't give a shit about this. But that's not what you care about. In spite of the creator's vision, or what the creator wants for their own piece of art, you are in favor of Sony holding it hostage and just sitting on it and farting all day. They're not even doing anything with it, and you still favor them having the reins over the community of people who actually give a shit about it. And that community includes the people who fucking made it. I say this truly and sincerely. Get out of this hobby. We don't want people like you in it. You make literally everything worse. Toodles.